Today on The Big Questions, whistleblowing, arming the police, and the sinfulness of plastic surgery and tattoos. Good morning. Welcome. I'm Nicky Campbell. This is The Big Questions from Newcastle upon Tyne. Today we're live from the Students' Union at Northumbria University. Welcome everyone to The Big Questions. Now, this week in his Freedom to Speak Up review, Sir Robert Francis said that NHS trusts in England should appoint guardians for staff to report their concerns to. He said too many people are bullied and intimidated if they report wrongdoing. In banking, it's taken 7 years for evidence to finally come to light, suggesting an HSBC Swiss subsidiary helped thousands of super-rich clients across the world avoid paying hundreds of millions worth of tax. The IT worker who downloaded the evidence has been pursued, charged and vilified. It's always right to report wrongdoing. In the financial sector, Nicholas, you were, just to get it right, you blew the whistle on HSBC. It was illegal charges. You quite clearly say it was fraud. It's ruined your life, hasn't it?
Yes. For 12 years I've been trying to expose it. And I don't know if it's right to whistleblow or not, but if anybody asks my advice for financial crimes, I would say don't do it. The establishment is so corrupt in this country that you will not... I mean, I'm glad to see the NHS whistleblowers are now... The issues are being addressed in the NHS, but in the financial sector, there's no support. I've been on my own. The fraud's been covered up by every single regulator, by the Solicitors Regulation Authority, the Financial Conduct Authority, Financial Services Authority, the Ministry of Justice, the Legal Services Board. It's been completely covered up, but it's now... thanks to this programme and the Treasury Select Committee, Jessie Owen...
It's the first time you've really spoken about this, isn't it?
Yes. MP Jessie Owen challenged the Financial Conduct Authority in Parliament last Tuesday as to why they'd covered it up. I asked the FCA what they'd done about my complaint, and they basically asked HSBC what to say to me, and they copied and pasted HSBC's response, and HSBC lied to the FCA, and the FCA just passed that lie on to me.
A lot of accusations there, obviously. Let me get to the personal. What was it like for you after you exposed it, when you were trying to expose it, when you were working there, the impact on your life?
Well, as soon as I blew the whistle, I was immediately sacked. And I haven't properly worked since. I've had a couple of consultancy jobs. But I've been fighting for... There's hundreds of thousands of people affected, about £1 billion, and I've been fighting for people to get money back. But in the process, with no income... I mean, the worst time was last year. I was thrown off benefits by Atos. I had no money for 4 months. I was being repossessed by my mortgage company, Northern Rock, which was bought out by the taxpayers, now government-owned.
And the consequences for your health?
I suffer depression. Find it very difficult to concentrate for long periods of time. It's just destroyed me. But now, now it's coming out, I'm a bit more relieved.
What about your colleagues' attitudes to you? Because they called you, I think it was your boss, called you Mr. Ethical. On
Twitter, I'm Mr. Ethical. My boss, Andrew Cox, when I was complaining about the fact that they shouldn't be doing these things, oh, here comes Mr. Ethical. The partners refused to discuss it with me.
What about your colleagues at the same grade?
They didn't know. The colleagues, I had a team, I was the head of a team of about 4 people. I never told them because of morale, and I was at the meeting with the bank. I told the bank 12 years ago what they were doing was illegal, and since that day, once we got the work in, I was telling the partners, we've got to change this contract, it's illegal. They weren't prepared to discuss it. They took all the work away from me to their head office in Liverpool. They sacked my team in London, and they said to me, you've got to find more other clients to justify your salary.
So your message... In the financial sector, of course, there are different judgments apply for different areas. Let me just ask you about the financial. If somebody wants to blow the whistle on in the same way that you did, what is your advice to them?
Leave it, get another job, leave it, and get on with your life, because it's too corrupt.
Well, listen, thank you for that testimony. Ian Foxley, sometimes it's not worth it. I mean, just to tell you, you're chair of Whistleblowers UK, former whistleblower yourself. That was to do with the arms industry, I do believe. Sometimes, you heard that, it's just not worth it. It destroys lives.
Yes. We're discussing now whether we have a moral duty to report. And I think we do all have a moral duty to report. You don't realise the impact of whistleblowing until you do it, because you don't think that the organisation that you've trusted and you've been brought up in is actually going to turn on you quite so vehemently. And
life-changing.
Absolutely. And what we've heard from Nick, the experience of Nick, is unfortunately all too familiar. We run a helpline across all sectors, and we hear the same story time and time again. And that allows us to look at what really happens in the process. The process is one of the initial crime. You discuss, you find out something, you take it to someone that you trust to try and get something done about it. And what happens is that the organisation begins a cover-up. And when you won't be quiet about it, the element of coercion comes in.
And you're
you become vilified, you become ostracised, you lose your job. With your job goes your money, with your money goes your savings. You can't get another job, and you're down a very slippery slope. So you really need to think hard about it if you know that that's what's going to happen. And it's like being a child. If I see my friend getting a kicking for doing the right thing, am I going to do the right thing?
So, but you have to
probably not.
Then do you have to just, morally hold on tight, take the flak, and just, grit your teeth and do it?
Yes, I think you do, because there's no difference between high-scale corruption and child abuse. If I saw a child being interfered with or abused, am I going to stand back and say, oh no, I can't deal with that because it might impact me, my life, my job? No. I'm going to say, stop, you're wrong. And we come to a point with organisations and politicians and celebrities. Thomas Fuller said in the 17th century, be ye so high, the law is above you. And I don't think we should have a two-tier system in this country that allows the majority of us to have to answer to the law, and a certain select group of people or companies or politicians to escape the law just because they have power and money. That's wrong.
David Lewin, the Henry Jackson Society, easier said than done.
Well, I think the key with these kinds of debates is it's always the same thing, that it's very easy to go on TV and morally proclaim we must all do this and it's important in that way. And I think there are elements of it we can all agree on. If you're talking about life and death, health service, these kinds of things, I don't think it's the same as child abuse. Of course, when you're looking at child abuse, of course, we would all agree that you have that moral duty. My point is simply...
Hang on, David. No, there are lives at stake in the NHS.
Will you just... That's what I'm saying, exactly. So we can all agree on the NHS. We can all agree on issues like child abuse. What we can't agree on, and what we're seeing this difficulty here, is life is a little bit more complicated than that when you get to things that are not quite so morally clear. And so, for example, if you are you have a family life, you have a mortgage to pay, you have a job, it's very difficult, and you're talking about lower level wrongdoing in that way, then the question becomes that it is a personal moral setup where you have to be at one with your moral sort of internal being, but you also have to, in that case, take into account the context for yourself. And I think that's where the sort of organizational culture issues are very important.
Look after number one.
In terms of, not look after number one, but be in terms of your organizational culture in a way that you are able to support this kind of thing, but also, as you say, looking after the kinds of interests that's not totally illegitimate once you're talking about lower level things, to think about this in the round in that way. So it's very easy to say it's a moral issue, black and white in that sense. My personal view is it's not quite like that.
Would have died if whistleblowers had thought of number one?
Well, as I say, we can all agree that in this kind of a context, the moral clarity would have to be internally very clear.
There are other contexts, aren't there?
But
So where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line?
Well,
where do you say, I'm right to report this, and oh, I'll let that go?
The point is very simple, that the line, once you get to the lower things, is about a number of factors that isn't as black and white as going on TV and saying whistleblowing is always right or whistleblowing is always wrong. Once you get away from the deaths and the abuse and...
What are the lower things?
It is in that kind of way. Let's say that you're at the BBC and you can see that somebody's cooking their expenses. Are you going to go and make a big deal out of it, lose your job over that, or have a 3-year period of losing your colleague, your job, being ostracized, whatever else? I'm not saying that either of those is right. What I'm saying is
the financial sector generally?
there is a more difficult debate to be had about that internally and whatever else. Financial sector as well. I'm not an expert on the financial sector per se, but I do think that there is an element whereby there are complicated elements to the story.
What you're talking about is very clear and very simple. It's about right and wrong. And it's about whether it is someone is doing something which is fraudulent and corrupt, and should you declare it?
But
what you're saying is... No, hang on, let me finish. What you're saying is...
Surely you can see that there is a difference...
I might lose my job, and therefore I won't do it. It's about the mechanism that you choose to employ...
All right.
That
Wait, it's interesting because he's saying...
protecting the whistleblower.
Wait. He's saying there's a duty to family as well. We heard there from Nicholas about the consequences.
And in the moral duty...
One at a time.
There are two moral duties. There's a moral duty of the organisation to respond appropriately. And when the organisation does not respond appropriately and victimises the whistleblower, then the organisation is wrong. We must protect people who try to do the right thing.
Leroy Logan, let's talk, if I may, Davis, the police. Of course, this has come up time and time again in the police, whether it be racism, whether it be corruption, but you also know and understand the point that Davis is making and the point that Nicholas is making, given his own experience. It requires a great deal of bravery and, if you like, moral fortitude, doesn't it?
Well, and to assist people in that, it's always better to have support, not only with your family and friends, but also in the organisation. And that's one of the reasons why we set up the Black Police Association, to support people who have made a stance and are willing to stand by their principles, especially when it comes to the risk assessment, because if you are seen as misplaced loyalties and you're part of a team and they think you are an enemy as a result of that, if you are on a response team, you're going to think, well, actually, if I don't say anything, my principles are going to be undermined. But if I do say something, if I'm getting a beating somewhere and I call up for help, are they going to come running as they should? So all of these things. But what helps that individual is to know that there's like-minded people within the organisation willing to support them, give them the strength of character. And in closing, we've just lost an amazing talent of an officer called Carol Howard, who stood up for her rights and resigned only on Friday because the way in which she was vilified and ostracised. And we gave her support, but she still thought, well, I just can't do any more. And I can understand what you say about, you know, the impact on the individual. So we'll support as best we can, but it's down to the individual on how they play this thing out.
It's exactly why we set up Whistleblowers UK, because we found, collectively, that there was no organisation in this country, and you can hear talk about public concern, that supports whistleblowers.
In the time we have, let me bring Sarah in, because Sarah, Sarah Brooks, work psychologist, University of Sheffield. There's some quite interesting psychological stuff here, isn't it? You know, groupthink, breaking ranks, letting down the side, and all that. There are big risks, aren't there?
Yeah, so I think what's highlighted really importantly this morning is that it's a very risky behaviour, speaking up as an individual when you don't necessarily have the support of the collectives. And what we do know is that people tend to go with the majority opinion, even though they don't necessarily agree that that's right. So speaking out as an individual is risky behaviour because there's lots of fear associated with it. So if you upset your manager, they could hold a grudge against you, they could retaliate, you could be ostracised by your colleagues. So there's lots of different things going on from a psychological point of view, and it makes people weigh up, is this going to be the best thing for me or not? And I think as a collective, we're not necessarily saying that reporting wrongdoing is the wrong thing. What we're saying is it's the right thing to do. However, you have to bear in mind as an individual, is it the right thing for me? And sometimes in organisations don't support that. And therefore the decision is, no, it's not the right thing for me. The right thing for me is to keep quiet and
So
maybe
we need a change in
leave.
culture.
Wait a minute,
Yeah,
no,
we need to
audience
change the
hands up.
culture.
Nicholas wants to
That's
come
right,
back.
we do, yeah.
Nick,
Yeah,
we're looking at a cultural sea change here, aren't we?
Yeah.
Maybe
Indeed.
we're on the road to it. I know there's some hands up. I'll come to you in just a second, Nicholas.
Yeah, I mean, I was basically told if I didn't do this illegal work, I'd get the sack anyway.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's not a question of right and wrong. I mean, if you see a car coming towards a pram, you rush out and move the pram. You don't think, is this right or wrong? You just do it. And I just did what I thought was right. What I didn't know was there was so much corruption, and I didn't know that I wouldn't be supported. I thought I would actually be supported and protected.
Were there any colleagues, anyone who said,
No.
yeah,
There was one colleague who agreed with me that it was illegal, and he wrote emails to the partners saying, you must stop doing this, and they ignored him as well. I've had no support at all for 12 years. I was a member of the Whistleblowers UK, and I left them. Because to me, it's not an academic exercise. I am in the middle. I'm still in the middle of blowing the whistle on this.
Ronnie, I'll come to you in a second. We had some hands up. There was a lady just at the back there. Ronnie Campbell, the MP, in just a second. There comes the microphone.
I applaud Whistleblowers UK because I wish the organisation had been around when I was a whistleblower. I was a residential social worker in the early 1990s in the Durham County area, and there was lots of cases of neglect of children, not sexual, I have to say, physical and neglect. They were breaking the Children's Act right, left and centre. At the time I was working for an agency. Anyway, I reported all my cases, of all my instances of neglect that I'd observed to the head of social services, and there was a subsequent investigation that even sort of went up and down the country and interviewed children from 10 years before. So I was pleased I did it, but I lost my job. And how they sacked me was basically just not renew my contract. The annoying thing was...
Because they saw you as trouble.
Yeah, obviously, and there was no support from any colleagues. And the annoying thing was the people who were involved in the abuse or neglect, they're still working for Durham County till today.
OK, thank you very much for that testimony. Fiona, you came in earlier on. NHS whistleblowing, you've done it many times, haven't
Yes.
you? From within, as a member of staff, and also because of what happened to, was it
Was my grandfather.
your grandfather?
Yeah.
When you were blowing the whistle from within, what were the attitudes pointed towards you from your colleagues?
It was mixed. I had support from a couple of colleagues who were involved with the whistleblowing, but it was the management higher up. They knew I was a whistleblower. They knew that the CEO of the organisation actually outed me as a whistleblower to the person I whistleblew on, which at the same time, my grandfather was also ill. He died as a result of NHS neglect, and that was very difficult because I was an NHS employee. She actually sent me an email on the morning of my grandfather's funeral demanding to see me about my whistleblowing, which, as you can imagine, is incredibly intimidating. And I managed to put off that meeting until I came back off leave. It's a horrible, horrible situation for anybody to be in. I was at the Francis Review this week in London. We felt that, though, you know, people think that we've had acknowledgement of Francis that things weren't right, and it isn't right. But we haven't had any redress. There are whistleblowers there that they've lost families. There's one living out in a garage, dependent on food banks. There are whistleblowers that have committed suicide. It's the far end of the scale.
Yeah,
it's
the
absolutely
in-group.
shocking.
It's the in-group and it's
and
the
we
out-group.
didn't have help. And Ronnie, you never helped me. You didn't help my colleagues. One of the whistleblowers' families sent emails to 71 councillors across North East and North.
I'll let Ronnie respond to that.
Nobody helped us.
I don't know which one you're referring to. Was B, you mean? I didn't personally.
There was lots of you. It wasn't just yourself, with respect. The
So you got me involved, you say?
Yes, we did.
Right,
we did.
right.
It was about 6 years ago the whistleblowing started.
Because
we tackled it locally first.
Well, let Ronnie
and then-
respond.
No, we went outside the area. We took
Okay.
our campaign to London.
It's fair to let
because
Ronnie
nobody was
respond.
listening.
Well, I've always encouraged whistleblowers in my town. I've always said to the union, the unison in the hospitals, if there's a problem there, they should anonymously come to me.
If you've got a union behind you, it's,
Of course,
it's a more
indeed.
comfortable situation.
And I have had that before,
Well,
and
the
I've
unions
taken
didn't help.
No.
I've
No.
taken. Well, wait a minute. I've
I
taken.
was a
When I
union
have
rep
getting a
as
case
well.
like that as a member of Parliament, I've taken it to the chief executive of the trust, and I've tried to sort it out. Whatever's
They're
been gone wrong in the
complicit.
health service, I do that regularly. If there's something happening,
Ronnie, I can give you examples
No, hang on,
where
well, let's-
unions
while
have
we're
been
with Ronnie.
involved in covering it up wrongdoing. Certainly within commercial organisations, I have a prime example of a multi-million-pound corruption going on where the Unite Union have covered it up in order to safeguard jobs within the company practising the corruption.
Okay, Ronnie, before my learned friends become involved in too much of this, let me ask you, as a lawmaker, you sit on those very comfortable or uncomfortable-looking green benches. Should whistleblowing be statutory?
Yes, I think it should be made law. Things that's happening, Nick, was just explained to other people. I don't think that should happen, and that's in our society. That's not acceptable. And we, as parliamentarians, should listen to the Francis report and actually legislate.
And give
on
it
your
teeth.
behalf.
It's nice to hear an MP saying something like that, but the reality is it's the revolving door situation. In my case...
But we're going to stop it,
let
Nick.
me just
Stop
let me make this
revolving door.
point. The head of the Solicitors Regulation Authority at the time of my complaint was a guy called Anthony Townsend. The SRA covered it up. I then went to the FCA. The FCA covered it up. If I want to complain about the FCA, I have to go to the Complaints Commissioner. That is Anthony Townsend, who's already covered it up in another organisation. It goes round and round and round.
There is
Well,
no
Well, listen, I've got to say, and it behoves me to say, he hasn't got a right of response. So a lot of the people who are mentioned here today haven't got a right of response. We have to say that because that's only fair. But let me ask you Ronnie, why are you here? Groupthink is interesting. The sort of collective wall of self-protection. I'm not pointing any fingers at you as MP, because so many MPs were doing it on a greater or lesser extent. But why didn't some MP stand up at some stage and say, look, claiming for cake tins and paper clips and duck houses is wrong? Why did it take somebody, a whistleblower, to actually go to the Daily Telegraph with it? What was going on?
Well, I don't know. I don't have a claim for that sort of stuff.
I'm not saying. I'm just saying generally.
As
As
far as I'm concerned, it was a good job, well done, because it was out of control.
But why did nobody stand up and say, look, what we're doing here is...
Even the people, there was one man went to jail that actually was giving your expenses. I mean, it was that bad in Parliament, but the best thing that ever happened with the members of Parliament was the whistleblowing, and now our expenses is extremely controlled.
Nicky, I think...
That's unfair, That's really unfair. Members of Parliament are really now under IPSA,
Ronnie,
which is a private company, by the way, controls our expenses.
You asked the majority of this country if they trust
you've only got to say, Mike Pine, last word. We'll be talking to you in a minute as well.
Thanks, Nicky. I think it's very important. I think if the public look at this, the one thing that they're after from anybody who works in big organisations, whether it's the police, the National Health Service, is that's honesty and integrity. If people see wrongdoing, malpractice, they should at all times be able to come forward. If you're an employee, you want your staff to come to you if there's a problem, because that's what we want.
Indeed.
And thank you, Nicholas. We wish you well. You may have something to say about that debate, so please log on to bbc.co.uk/thebigquestions, follow the link to the online discussion, and you can join in on Twitter using our hashtag BBCTBQ. We're live from Newcastle this morning. Also coming up, should police have the right to bear tasers? And is it wrong to modify your body with tattoos or plastic surgery? So, tell us what you think about those topics now. Send us any other ideas or thoughts you may have about the programme. Well, on Monday, the Police Federation voted for all frontline uniformed officers to be offered a taser as protection against possible attacks by terrorists. Tasers, which use 50,000 volts to stun the victim, have been linked to at least 10 deaths in England and Wales over the past decade. Should police have the right to bear tasers? Mike Pannett, retired officer, if they want to, that's what you're saying, they should have the option. Yeah, is it not a bit un-British?
Look, if we take ourselves back and we look around the world, there's no doubt that the British police model, our British police officers, are the envy of the world. For years, people have travelled to Britain to look at how we police our communities. But if you ask our police officers now, the men and women who are going out daily doing the job, you talk about the sort of Dixon of Dock Green type policing, they just simply put their hands in their heads and think, it's not like that now.
It's more dangerous than it ever has been.
If you fast forward, well, if you're talking about that, we as police officers, what we see now, our unarmed police service, you remember there's only 3% of our police service that are armed. So if you fast forward to 2015, we as the police service are probably facing the biggest threat since the Second World War. And I think it's only right and proper we've got to look at what that threat is.
What about Irish Republican terrorism during the 70s and 80s?
We are facing, without doubt, this country and the European community as a whole. We've seen examples of what's happened with, if you talk about terrorism for 1 minute, in Paris, we saw only yesterday in Copenhagen. We've seen incidents around Europe. The threat is there. We've seen the threat assessment to police officers.
When an armed response unit turn up.
Go to the highest level. We saw the dreadful incident, what happened with Lee Rigby, and even in London, it took 15 minutes for a police to arrive with armed officers. Now, what we're saying is, I think, first of all our armed police officers in the country are all volunteers. I'm not one for saying all police officers should be made to carry taser, but I think the threat at the moment, there are other issues, there's mental health issues.
If you're a Bobby on the beat and you want to have a taser, you should be able to get one. Have a little bit of training and have one.
I think, look, first of all, it's not a little bit of training. In America, they give you a taser and say, there you go, there's your taser. But here in Britain, it's a 3-day course. But the point of what I'm trying to get across is, what do we expect from our police service? Do we want them to be able to go out there? And bearing in mind the threat at the moment, just on terrorism, is that it's likely to be a lone wolf attack, somebody armed with a knife or a machete, like we saw in the Lee Rigby case. And our men and women, what are we expecting them to do? When they go out on duty, you see them dressed with slash-proof Kevlar gloves, with body armour. You know, the whole landscape of policing is changing. The threat to our police has changed. And should we, what do we want? Do we want our police officers to be able to try and defend themselves and the public, or are we just expecting them to run away? Because that's the only option.
Leroy Logan, why not? Unprecedented threat. Would you not want the option?
The option is there. In all honesty, I'm not saying that tasers shouldn't be there. They should be a specialist use by specialist firearms officer who are on 24-hour deployment. And you can also have tasers with specific officers on your borough, in the boot of a car, where it's secure, so that it can be even quicker to that officer or that PCSO, whoever, who needs help. But to say this unprecedented threat, I was a probationer during the IRA bombings in Canary Wharf, and where there was carnage. And are you telling me the threat is more than then? And I agree, there was a lot of outcry in the 80s about we need firearms, but we got on with it because, in all honesty, the culture of this country does not embrace firearms like it does in America.
Look,
and in all honesty, we see firearms at transport hubs, iconic sites, and even people think, gosh, you know, that's a bit over the top. Would you want to see an armed officer on your side road, on your high street?
I think we've got to ask the question of those very men and women who are actually going out and doing the job. And I've worked in London and I've worked in the rural counties as well. I've faced shotguns, I've faced people with knives. I've never carried a gun or a taser. If you'd have asked me 3 years ago, would I wanted to have carried a taser, I'd have probably said not. But you've got to fast forward, like I said earlier, to 2015. The threat, the landscape of policing has changed. And now I'm not saying give everybody taser. Those police officers, And we talk about London, I already said it took 15 minutes for our armed officers to get to the scene at the Woolwich Barracks. If you go to the rural communities, you might be waiting half an hour for somebody to come and lock you up.
But in all honesty,
an audience coming.
You know, you can always say that, you know, tasers will help, but sometimes they can be worse. You know, in all honesty, the specialist officers are a lot trained more than 3 days, and they have refreshers. And it's not only about using it, it's around your dynamic risk assessment and your decision making. I know when I've had to deploy armed officers, tasers or otherwise, I would get proper tactical advice. And a lot of the times it was around containment.
Can tasers save lives? If you otherwise use a taser when in other circumstances you might have shot someone.
Absolutely. And remember, tasers take lives.
And more importantly,
militarisation of the policing is slowly growing. And in all honesty, look at the water cannons which Boris went and bought. Now Bill Bratton has said that's the worst thing you should have done.
If I may, and I agree. I agree.
David's in a second. Mike, in a second. Let me.
Don't worry. 3 days training, it wasn't right there. The police would have given says it would have proper training.
All right, audience, and then Davis, and I'll come back with you. Lady there, yeah. A very good morning.
Good morning. Do you not think that the British public would feel safer that police carry tasers so that they could bring a dangerous situation, if it arises, under control quite quickly?
And across there, the guy with the glasses and the grey. Yeah, hi.
I have lived experience of the police force in Northern Ireland, in particular. The police officers there that I've been out in the community with, accompanying them and things. They are armed, but they get specific training for that. And confidence in policing, there's a key word there that's not been used yet, is confidence in policing with the public. It's taken years and years of a peace process in Northern Ireland, the transformation of the RUC to the police service in Northern Ireland to gain more confidence in policing because of the abuse of power that could happen, that has happened. And when you arm police officers and you militarise the police force, it creates a huge tension within the community and public confidence in policing.
Yeah.
Morning. But I think the main problem is that, you know, what if this, you know, this power is exploited? You know, when do policemen cross the line and, you know, abuse using tasers? Like, when is it appropriate to use it? When is it not appropriate to use it?
I think an interesting point is body cam.
In a second, with you, Davis, coming. Don't worry, Mike. Don't worry, Mike.
I think we have to talk about two different things.
Would you want one if you were Bobby on the beat?
I would, but I think we have to talk about two different things here because of the nature of the threat today. Listen, I think we have to talk about two different things here. I think we have to talk about two different things here. It seems to me that a lot of the concerns are about the culture of policing. Leroy wrote in his article about a sort of occupation that the police would hold over the United Kingdom. If we don't trust our police enough to have this debate just around the tactical necessity, then there is a real problem there, but that's a different problem to assessing properly what is the tactical necessity. And we've seen two attacks in Europe in the very recent history where people under police protection have not been possible to be prevented from being murdered by Islamist radicals in terrorist attacks, despite the fact, and by the way, Copenhagen yesterday would have been a hell of a lot worse if it had not been the case that these armed police were already there because it was a high-risk target. So when you have these kinds of things, you have these kinds of buzzword about the militarisation of the police. Look at the armed police at King's Cross Station today. Look at the armed police walking around outside Westminster. That is the militarisation of police, and there's nothing wrong with that because these are the kinds of targets that we do need to see protected in that way. But that's not going to be good enough if you're in some outer borough in some discussion where it takes 10 minutes for somebody to turn up while the terrorists are shooting up the entire hall.
Ronnie, are we facing an unprecedented threat?
I don't think we are. We had it in the IRA days. We didn't have armed police. And I think it's a very, very bad path to go down to armed police. I think, in all fairness, we've got the best health service in the world and we've got the best police service in the world as well. Once you start opening them up to arms,
convince the MP.
Nicky, I think I find it absolutely extraordinary that here we are in 2015. People maybe don't realise this. Assaults on police officers are running at around 400 a week. The problems that they're facing with people who are exceptionally violent crime in boroughs of London have gone up and around our country have gone up. We're expecting our men and women to go out there and face threats unarmed on a daily basis. We should be looking at, you know, those very same officers, these balanced officers, dedicated men and women who are going out there. They're actually asking, give me body cams as well. There's nobody more, you know, our police services, as we've got a very good, nearly 70% of the British public support our police.
They have
and I find it totally extraordinary to say we're not facing any bigger threats.
Yeah, they've got CS spray already. And in all honesty, you've got a flawed argument about the unprecedented threat. We are in dangerous times, admittedly, but we've also got deployment of officers, increasing number of firearms officers, and we could easily improve the number of tasers on a borough in secure vehicles, etc. To be walking around with them on a day-to-day basis, and unfortunately, people make the wrong decisions. And you being on the receiving end, you wouldn't like that wrong decision.
Leroy's talking about London, that I know very well. But if you look into the rural communities, you saw Derek Bird, for example, went round, shot over a dozen people. It took about 8 hours for the police to even get in a position to be able to deal with him. These are not just London issues. These are issues around our country.
How close do you have to be with a taser to somebody?
Well, it says within 20 feet. But I think going back to this whole taser question, what do the public want from our police? Do they want them to be able to go out there and do a job? I'm telling you now, 2 years ago, the majority of police officers in this country would have said, no, I don't think I need a taser. But the landscape of policing is
who are
changing.
disproportionately on the receiving end of tasers, they may have a different opinion. Unfortunately, you see those disproportionalities not only on the use of tasers, but the form of assaults.
Davis Lewin.
There is no difference.
These are different debates.
Davis Lewin, have you seen a situation as you've gone about your life that you thought, if I were a policeman in this situation, I would like to have a taser?
Well, as I just said, look at what's happening across Europe in these kinds of attacks. Of course, I would like to have an armed response ready.
You're strolling through the city.
Much more ready than this. And let's just also be very clear that whatever problems there might be in terms of ethnic minorities, in terms of police culture, in terms of the relationship between the police and the society,
in terms of inevitable tragedies,
the police themselves are saying that they need this kind of technology to defend themselves. And also, I just want to be very clear. My experience of the response to this question in advance of the debate has been extraordinary. I thought the entire British public is against this. Britain has a very staid police culture in that way, and that's good. The response has been overwhelmingly, anecdotally, by people that I'm speaking to. The gentleman is right. In the country, I think that there is a readiness to appreciate that the threat is, unlike these gentlemen who do not seem to quite realise that, the threat is different. It is dangerous.
What happened to the riots in London? It was all because of
we're not going to blame the... No. We're not going to blame the police for those riots.
We're listening to Ronnie Campbell. Otherwise, I will have to flourish the yellow card.
Because of a young teenager, whatever he was, criminal or not a criminal, he was shot by the police and then riots erupted in London. No, that's the situation you can get in when you're armed police.
These are dangerous times.
They are dangerous times. We had dangerous times on the IRA.
Absolutely. Who
wants to get Mike Hannon? And then the audience, more audience comments.
We're talking about our police here. We're very balanced. We're seeing a 70% of support for our police nationally still, thank goodness, and still only a 20% for politicians. We hear it time again. People who are sitting behind the desk commenting on the very men and women who are going out daily. When they're faced with a situation, they're on their own, backs against the wall. This is the situation. 97% of our officers are unarmed. It's about threat and risk, and that risk is against our police at the moment.
Research to show that armed police has a corresponding impact on criminals who arm themselves. In all honesty, not every time a police officer has a contact with a suspect, they think gun. In America, they have to, because it's their culture. And as a result of that, I bet you my bottom dollar that if you start arming police officers with tasers, you'll get an increase in the number of officers facing guns. It's a cultural impact.
Please carry batons now, metal batons, which are of less threat than a taser. End of story. All our police are asking for is to be able to go out there, defend themselves, look after you, the public. What do you want from our police? And I think this is an early debate. I'm absolutely not for militarisation.
Since 2002 in America, 500, this is a survey done in 2012, 500 people have been killed by tasers, there or thereabouts, while being arrested or in custody.
Yeah, we're absolutely right. In this country, in the UK, there is no cause of death directly attributed to taser. That's a fact. Now, we see, and that's a fact, I'm only talking factually, the bottom line is, I'm like probably the rest of you, don't want to see our police going around fully armed everywhere. You see it at the train stations, you see it outside Parliament, but what we're asking here is we're looking at the threat and the risk, and that threat and risk is against our police officers. What do the public want our police to do?
Is there a doctor in the house?
I'm afraid so, yeah.
Doctor?
Yeah,
a danger of, if you've obviously got a cardiac condition,
yeah,
it's going to be very dangerous. You can't say to somebody in the heat of the moment, excuse me, before I fire the taser at you, do you have a cardiac issue? But just tell us about the dangers here, or the plus points.
From a medical point of view, I can't think of any plus points. You are submitting somebody to a significant electrical shock.
But it's a plus point if it's a dangerous person who may kill people unless you do that.
It may well do, but you don't know the psychological state of that alleged criminal. You don't know what he's done. You don't know the proof. There's nothing to prove that he's actually been in that situation. From my point of view as a doctor, I would not like to see somebody tasered who has a medical condition such as a heart condition. They might have a neurological condition. They might have a whole bunch of conditions that will affect them seriously if they're tasered. So it's... Plus, maybe on an alternate point, I do worry that if you start arming the police, will you get this response that Leroy is talking about, where the public will arm themselves in response to that? So there's a bigger question, not just a medical question.
Will it up the ante?
Yeah.
Look, it's again...
Could it up the ante?
I don't think so, because we've got an absolute professional bunch of police officers in this country. You know, there's no doubt about that. Those very officers are wanting to carry body-worn cameras to show the public these are the absolute dangers we're facing. I think it's absolutely right and proper that this should be the question for those men and women going out there to doing the very, very difficult job, facing, like I've said, unprecedented violence used against them. The whole criminal justice system either needs to get the finger out, protect them, or we need to give our police officers enough protection, because they're all family people, they all go home to their loved ones, and I'm hearing every single day horrendous incidents around the country, and I think this is the early start of a debate. I think we don't want to see everybody carrying guns around, but those officers going out and doing the job, we must adequately protect them, absolutely.
Ian, I'm going to give you the last word on this, because you're ex-military.
Indeed, and I've carried a gun on the streets of Britain. So I, as a military man, would not like to see an armed police force in this country, and I think most of the military will say that. We do have armed response units. They are deployed to the points that they're needed, and we have a very good intelligence service that actually points them and gets the forces at the appropriate points when they're needed, and hopefully before they're needed. There are other ways, it's called non-lethal measures, of taking down somebody who needs to be restrained. You can use pepper sprays, you have CS, you have flashbangs if you're in a room, you know, creates a concussive effect with light and sound. I once ran a research project in non-lethal measures, which actually had a glue gun, where you squirt someone like a big gluey toffee gun to slow them down. It's using the appropriate job for the task.
The appropriate job
need guns
for the task. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you. And you can join in all these mornings, this morning's debates by logging on to bbc.co.uk, the big questions. Follow the link to the online discussion, and you can tweet using the hashtag BBCTBQ. So, what do you think about our last big question? Tell us, please. Is it wrong to modify your body? Now, by the way, if you'd like to be in the audience at a future show, you can email audience@mentorn.tv. We're in Walsall next Sunday, Cardiff on the 1st of March, and London the week after that. Leviticus, the third book of Moses in the Old Testament, has 27 chapters of instructions given by God to Moses, apparently, on how the children of Israel should conduct themselves and live their lives. Verse 28 of chapter 19 bans tattoos. Not that young people seem to be paying much attention. Nearly a third of 16 to 44-year-olds have a tattoo. Many, more than one. And last week, a Vatican Assembly on women's issues decried plastic surgery as being aggressive towards the feminine identity. But in America, there's a church actually encouraging body modification as a way to experience the divine by strengthening the bond between mind, body and soul. Is it wrong to modify your body? Pastor David, it's all about whose body it is, right?
Yeah.
Is your body your body?
Yeah, I think based on religious stand.
Is your body your body?
It's not.
Your body's not your body?
It's not my body.
Whose body is it?
Yeah, because the Word of God tells us that our body belongs to God.
That's not your body, it's God's body.
It's God's body. So, and you wouldn't want to do what God wouldn't, do to his body, to that body. So he gave us the body, so it doesn't belong to us. So which means we shouldn't have a sentiment that, because I have my body, because whatever you do to your body, most of the time based on the present condition or situation you are at that point in time, which could change at any point in time. The way I think 20 years ago, it's not the way I'll be thinking now. So which means if you choose to do it now, to change any part of your body, put a tattoo or to do something
sinful.
Sinful. As far as I'm concerned, I think it's sinful because your body is not your body.
No, it's God's body.
It's God's body.
So it's kind of leasehold situation until Now, what about somebody who's needs gender reassignment because they're clearly in the wrong body and born of the wrong sex, and they need gender reassignment? That's quite a look on your face there.
Anyway, I think
I don't think you're going to go with this one, are you?
As far as I'm concerned, I think the only way, plastic surgery could come in any way is if there is an accident, somebody, had an accident, and for that fellow to be...
Or they're unhappy?
Not that they are not happy. Maybe medically now. They think the only way, we can bring this person back to normal is to carry some, plastic surgery in a way. That's different.
That's the only way?
It's not a willing.
It's not a boob job, if you'll pardon the expression, on a Sunday morning. That's not... that breast augmentation, that's the phrase I was looking for. That's a no-no, because it's the most popular in Britain. No. Daniel Johnson, Islamic Diversity Centre. From a Muslim perspective, what's wrong with tattoos? Is it that this is not our body, it's God's body? Is it the same kind of idea?
Well, I do agree with much of what the pastor said, but I look at it in an Islamic way, you could say. As a Muslim, I believe that the whole universe is an infinite series of God's signs pointing to God, the creator of the universe. And to unnecessarily modify God's creation is to build a barrier between us as human beings and God, the Creator. There are, of course, exceptions. Some Muslim scholars that I've consulted are even of the opinion that a person can have plastic surgery if they're depressed without getting it. But I personally feel that that's a bit of a dodgy road to go down. I think you can't improve upon perfection, and the creation of Almighty God is a wonder in and of itself, and we should appreciate it for what it is and modify it as little as little as possible.
I've got the Vatican said that if a woman has her face done, it compromises the humane expression from the face, and it reduces a woman's ability to empathise with others. Do you agree with that?
I don't know about that. I mean, I'm not...
Because some people would say the niqab is a similar problem that,
Well, the difference between plastic surgery or tattoos and any form of clothing, of course, is that clothing is temporary. It can be put on and taken off. My uncle very aptly compared getting a fashionable tattoo to having a pair of flared trousers grafted to your body. Once it's there, it's permanent, and it has disfigured a person for life.
As you well know.
As I've got tattoos myself. But from before I became a Muslim, I'm an idiot, just like everybody else. and if I can preach for one moment, any youngsters out there, if you're 16 and thinking about getting F off tattooed across your stomach, as I did, don't do it. It's not a good idea.
No. Must be a problem going swimming, perhaps.
Especially in prison girls.
Mind you, if someone's hogging the lane,
Who's going to read it?
Well, it also says, just one more. Yusuf Qaradawi, the respected Islamic scholar, I got his book about the rights and wrongs. I believe you me, it is one of my favourite books. I recommend it. He says that it's actually haram for women to pluck their eyebrows. Is it wrong to pluck your eyebrows?
Well, look at it this way, Nicky.
Sounds like a yes to me.
Well, let me answer it this way, and I'll be as brief as possible. Were I to borrow a car and take it back to its owner, having scratched into the bonnet, Daniel loves Jacqueline, and having put out one of the windows for no good reason, there's good reason to assume that the car owner would be annoyed. And similar to what the pastor said, I believe our bodies and everything belongs to God, and God has the right. He has the right to give us instructions as to what we should and shouldn't do with our bodies.
It's wrong to pluck eyebrows, yeah?
I believe. Let me finish on this point. I believe that there is a big difference between a gardener mowing the lawn and trimming back a rose bush, and for instance, you know, pouring engraving NFC and a crude image of Kevin Keegan on it with hydrochloric acid. There are some things which we can do with our body which are good, and some things which are actually defacing our bodies.
Right. Body art. You've got body art. King of Inkland. Where are you in this debate? What do you think?
There's been a resurgence of tattoos in the last decade or so. They've been around since mankind started. And you look at cultures around the world, there are communities. What inspired me, I was 9 when I saw Maori people, and that's a rite of passage in their community. And then there's people and tribes in Africa that modify their body in scarification.
Is it all over everything?
Yeah, I'm tattooed from head to toe, even my eyeballs.
Yeah.
And
sorry?
My eyeballs are tattooed as well, which is an extreme body modification to do.
You're telling me, what was it? Was it sore?
It was uncomfortable, but with what you're saying about 16...
Can I ask you, is everything tattooed?
Yeah, everything's tattooed.
Everything?
Yeah, everything's tattooed.
You must have trusted...
That's the thing, there's ethics in the tattoo industry, I'm glad, but there are some people, like you said, 16, which is wrong. You have to be 18 to have a tattoo. However, I was 9 when I knew I wanted to put artwork on my body. And this is the difference. I love art. I've always loved it from a young age. The difference is I can't draw very well. So unlike a Pablo Picasso or a Leonardo da Vinci putting their artwork out, I allow artists to put it on my body as the canvas, as the walking art, whether you like it or not. But I believe that we have the right to change our bodies, because whether it's tattoos or whatever you eat, you are what you eat. You know, your lifestyle falls into that element. So tattoos, body modification, for me, is a spiritual journey.
What about people... Fiona's dying to come in here. You've had a big smile on your face since we started. I know some of the things you're hearing. And I'll come to you like you have your say in a second. But what would you say to youngsters who want to have a tattoo and it might just limit their job opportunities? Would that...
Yeah, well, there are the situations where it could limit a job on it being visible, but we are the most tattooed nation. It's been said that we're the most tattooed nation in the entire world, where people can get discreet tattoos and covered up. This is 2015 now. There are...
Have you got a passport?
I do have a passport now. Yeah. The government denied me my passport because of my legal name. But that's part of my lifestyle. I changed my name, which you're legally entitled to do. But the government said they wouldn't give me the passport because of my name. But that's my lifestyle. That's something totally different.
Yeah.
So I changed my name, changed my body to how I like to live my lifestyle. But anyone out there that wants to get a tattoo that's visible, there has to be ethics in the industry as well, where if you haven't got like visible tattoos in the first place or heavily covered, the tattoo artist shouldn't do it unless you're knocking on his door for 2 or 3 years.
Can I ask you, what is tattooed on your most intimate part? What is tattooed? Is it a picture of something?
No, I have full colour. I just have full colouring.
Full colouring, OK. Fiona, you wanted to come in. You started getting exercise when we were talking about plucking eyebrows, didn't you?
Yeah, well, if I want to pluck, I will pluck. Thank you. And it's freedom.
Well said.
Yeah, it's freedom of expression.
And carefully said as well, yeah.
I was very careful. And it's freedom of expression.
Yeah.
He's not harming anyone. That's his choice.
Give him a round, give him a round of applause. It's his life. It's his body. Not to say otherwise. Let's Fiona.
Just quickly with religion, though, because religions always clash. Whatever religion you're on, one religion might disagree with another person's religion.
Really?
Obviously, yes, stating the obvious. But the body modification, I've got friends on the other side of the world that are part of the Church of Body Modification, and I disagree with it from being a religious point of angle. I believe it should be a spiritual journey, because 26 years ago I started this journey, and I was 9 years old when I knew I wanted to be on this journey.
Daniel first, then David,
I suppose it all really comes down to whether you take the position that myself and Pastor David take, that our bodies, like everything in the universe, ultimately belong to God, or not. If you do see the world the way I do, that everything God has created belongs to him and he has the right to give us instructions as to how we live, then things make sense. But if you don't, if you're an atheist or you believe in a God who's just made the world and then fallen asleep, then yes, these rules and regulations will seem absurd. It comes down to that one issue.
Women aren't allowed to pluck eyebrows. That's fine. But let me ask one more. Yeah.
Do you shave?
Are men allowed to pluck eyebrows?
I don't know, in all honesty. I don't know.
All right, OK. Sorry, what was your question?
Does he shave?
What?
Does he have a shave?
Don't ask me.
Do you have a shave?
Well,
do you have a shave?
Occasionally. I mean,
right, then you shave. So what's wrong with plucking?
Well, I'm not saying... I think I kind of made the point just now. It comes down to this. Do you believe in a God who has given us instructions as to how we live our lives or not?
Paul Bagley, British Association of Aesthetic Plastic Surgeons.
Yes.
Do you reckon sometimes, obviously, if it's done ethically, as we heard from Body Art, or indeed what you do, if there is a responsibility, some people, do you feel, it's not a cure-all, but are they on the way to a better psychological place if they have it done?
I think it would be stupid of me to say that cosmetic surgery will change your life. It will not change your life in a big way. It will not get you that partner that you've always wanted. It will not get you that job that you've always wanted. It will not do all those things. But what it might do is it might give you the confidence to go forward, to maybe be a bit more answerable in those interviews. You might actually get the job because you might have baggy eyes. You might feel bad about yourself. Kids bullying, sticky out ears. Bullying, we know, travels forward into your later life. It's a big issue. In terms of whether it's a responsible thing to do, I think everybody would agree. We all have our own rights about what we do with our bodies. I think there's no question about that. But it's finding...
Oh, there's a question about it.
It is, religious, I think it is. But it's finding an ethical treatment person, an ethical practitioner, an ethical surgeon that will actually look at you as a whole. We are doctors first, and we are surgeons second, and we are plastic surgeons third, and we are cosmetic surgeons last.
So if somebody doesn't need it, you'll say, look, honestly, you don't need
absolutely.
And if somebody ever comes to you wanting a breast augmentation, and you've said, yeah, fine, yeah. So that's purely for whatever vanity, that's fine, not a problem.
I'm pretty sure there are people in your industry that would just take the money because it's the same. I'm not in the tattoo industry, but in the tattoo industry there is a dark, gloomy area as well where people will just take the money and tattoo like the 16-year-old.
Quite deliberately, Paul's one of the most responsible guys in his field. But it's your body. If you want to have it done, that's fine.
I have no issue with that at all. As long as you've been monitored and checked and medically and psychologically it's appropriate, yes.
That's right. Yeah, OK. Somebody... David, Pastor David.
Yeah, I think if we look at it, in the area that, your body is yours and then you can do whatever you want to do with it, I understand, as a plastic surgeon or whatever, we shouldn't, have a mind of, benefiting, because it's going to profit them as a profession. Some people, they make, ends meet from that. But however, the truth, as to be said, because most of the time, the consequence of, some of these changes even affect the public fund.
The public fund?
Yeah, as in, in medically, if they have an issue medically, it affects,
Yeah, it's very, very carefully...
What about when you die, though? What about...
Ronnie Campbell, do you have a tattoo?
I haven't, but I've got a birthmark, and I've had it from birth. And it's we call it it's a wine stain, basically. That's what it is.
And I could have had when you were down the pit, though, you must have had a bit of.
Yeah, I got a couple of blue marks here and there. So it was
not quite the same, but
not quite the same. The way it was put on, it was a stone headers. But I have this, and I could have had this off years ago, laser treatment. But it was part of me.
It's you, yeah.
And I decided, look, it's part of my character. I don't want it off, I'll just leave it.
Yeah, OK. Right, last answer. Body art. This is you, isn't it?
Yeah, this comes down to individuals.
15 seconds.
Comes down to individuality and basically who you are, what you want to do. It's like when you die, you have the choice to be buried or cremated. If, for example, the Tutankhamun was mummified, you have the right to choose.
The right to choose. Thank you for watching. Debate continues on Twitter. We're in Walsall next week. Have a really good Sunday.